All right, everyone, welcome back to CIS126. We're on week 6 of the class of our 9-week-long class, so the end is coming near. And we are at the end of like the first big unit. There are 2 big units, 2 big ideas, the animation unit and then the gaming unit. Now, we spent a lot of time in terms of learning the software on several weeks, and then learning animation, and then that culminating into the first big project, the animation project. Then we're going into phase 2 after that, the gaming project. So that is learning interactivity, learning how Adobe Animate can be used for making video games. So I asked everyone, go to Canvas, because there's a poll here that I do want your feedback on. Where did I put it? On the welcome? Yeah, it's on the welcome. So go to week 6 welcome. And it's listed right there. There will be a poll this week. Please take time to respond. So click on that to open it. Just get it straight out of Canvas. I guess I can also put it directly in the chat if you're there at home. One question, and I mentioned this on Wednesday last week, I guess. So deadline for this project. We always operate under having some knowledge, some lectures on a particular week. Let's say if we go back last month, we would have had something on the 12th and the 14th, and then some sort of assignment, and then that's due on the 18th. Or if we have the week of the 19th, we have some stuff that week, and then a deadline on the Sunday of the end of that week. All right, for us today, we're on the 10th, and therefore the deadline would normally be on the 16th. Now, the assignment is all encompassing up to this point. In a sense, it's sort of like a midterm because it's an accumulation of everything you've looked at so far. And the time limit of that deadline is, I have it as the 16th, but the poll here, if you want to vote on this and have a little bit more time, either have things due on the a week after that, the 23rd, or 2 weeks after that deadline to the 30th, that's what the poll is there to vote for. Now, that doesn't change, though, that we will be starting next week on Monday, the gaming portion of things. We're going to move on to those concepts. So even if you vote for give me 2 more weeks or give me 3 deadlines, sure, but I'm still going to move on to the other work, and you're still going to have work that's due throughout those other weeks, because we have to talk about the next big topic, the last big topic, the gaming side of things. How do we use Adobe Animate to make a cool little game? But we'll still continue those lectures the week of the 17th, the 24th, the 31st, and then on the 31st is given the final project, which will be the gaming project. And that deadline, that final week of the class is the 31st. And then the final Sunday is the 6th there. And that deadline cannot be moved. The class officially ends. The summer ends. I cannot give any extensions past that, because then the fall semester starts a week later or something. So I can't do any further deadlines from that. So that's the calendar there. If you already voted, great. You don't need to vote again. If you haven't voted, make sure you vote on that. I think the system shows you the results after you vote, but let's see if this shows me what the votes are so far. Just to see that. Six responses so far. So what we've got is the big piece of the pie is July 30th, so 2 weeks. And then the second place is 1 extra week, and no votes for next week or this weekend. Okay, so that's how the votes are so far. I'm still collecting them this whole week. Those of you that are not here in person, now, if I do my math, is there 6 of you here? So has everyone voted? And then also those of you that are at home there as well, make sure you vote, because your vote does matter. So based on that, whatever deadline ends up being, I will change. If it changes, I will change the notice on the assignment. And whatever that deadline is, we got 7 votes now. So whatever that deadline is, the plan is still to learn the concepts of gaming and such, which entails a bit of programming. Adobe Animate lets you make animation projects, interactive projects, and we're going to make these games that run on iPhone or Android. So they're going to be full real games that if you like what you made, you can put it up to the App Store and get rich 99 cents at a time. So you will have a real game for real platforms coming right up starting next week. And the final project will be the game. So the votes will come in. Well, let's see what the homework is, the big midterm project. I'll get to all of our stuff in a moment. We still have a little bit more to learn. And so let me preview what this one is. First of all, note it's 20 points compared to a regular assignment of 10 points. There's also some extra credit. There's 3 opportunities of extra credit and up to 2 points each on those. So that's up to 6 points of extra credit. So if you totally fail on the things that are required, I guess you can make it up a little bit on the extra credits. I know that's too nice maybe, but you'll have a little extra credit. So here's what the assignment is. I'll preview it. We still have a little to learn. I'll show some examples from previous semesters again, just to see what they were able to accomplish in their time limit. So you're going to put together your own animated project based on everything we've learned so far. You've been working on your story, your Drabble, your storyboard. You can throw all that away and start over if you want, no problem. You can have all of this amazing idea previously and only do 1/4 of it, no problem. You have your previous ideas and you want to do the whole thing, great. It's very open-ended what you can do. Start over, continue what you've done, whatever you want. If you do start over, remember our deadlines, even if with the 3-week deadline, 2-week deadline wins out, you still have a deadline. So don't throw everything away and start over. We still have a deadline. Remember when our guest speaker, Rich, was here, we talked about the importance of deadlines. Sometimes products have to ship, make it or break it. The company goes bankrupt if you don't ship it, and then publish DLC and patches and such. Same for you, you have a deadline. You got to meet it. Because I've got a deadline to turn in your final grades. And if you spend 3 more days past the final deadline, I already turned in your grade, you got a B, I can't go back very easily and change it, you have a deadline. All right, so the project itself, as usual, full HD, 1920, 1080, 24 frames, default of ActionScript 3, which I haven't talked about what that is, but that's coming up next week. And an animation that's at least 30 seconds. I'll remind you again how to check your time and such on your project. At least 3 scenes, more scenes than that if you want. I recommend break up all your action in as many scenes as you want. At least 3 scenes. Some camera movement in the project. Some amount of music playing in the project. 1 song, multiple songs, whatever. We'll talk a little bit more about music still. Here's a new thing we'll talk about this week, parallax scrolling background. Let's say things are moving around on the screen. Let's say your character is moving around. We want your character to move left to right. I'll show you how to do that as well. How about a background with multiple levels, like the trees are moving and then the clouds are moving and then the floor is moving to get that sort of sense of depth? It's parallax scrolling. I'll show you how to do that. And then your project needs to be converted or exported as an MP4. Our Adobe Animate files are not viewable unless you have Adobe Animate. Well, you want to convert it to a real format that everyone in the world can see, MP4 format. I'll show you how to do that. And you're going to upload this stuff to Canvas. These files will probably be huge, so make sure you're uploading them with a good amount of time before the deadline. Don't log in 10 minutes, 5 minutes before the deadline and upload it, and then it uploads 15 minutes later. These files are huge, and depending on your internet speed, it'll upload quickly or not. If you upload them from our campus, they'll upload quick. We have very fast internet connections. At home, you might not have such great internet access. Upload those files to Canvas, all the grading requirements, extra credit, demonstrate your work. Yes, we will have the time where you come up here to the podium and show off your work and talk about it and tell us why it's amazing. If you're at home, you'll turn on your microphone at home on Zoom and tell us about your project. So you will demonstrate and talk about your project. Yes, it is scary. That's why it's 2 points extra credits. But you, in the real world, you need to be able to talk about, explain, or defend your work, why it's great, especially when you're working with a team with multiple people, or if you are trying to get hired and in an interview and such, you have to talk about yourself, your work, and that'll be a little practice, 2 points, up to 2 points extra credit. Walk cycle. The walk cycle is one of the hardest things to animate. That's why it's extra credit. But you've got the lecture, you've got the various videos, you've got those tracing graphics, and more knowledge that you can give yourself and practice, that if you have your character walking in a walk cycle, you can earn up to 2 points extra credit. Now, if your character is a spirit that has no legs, you can still do a walk cycle. There's still some sort of movement of it floating around and it leaving an ectoplasmic trail, and then the eyes blinking and such. You can still do a walk cycle for a thing that doesn't actually have legs. What about you've got a robot with wheels? You can still do a walk cycle. The wheels are turning. You know, one wheel is bigger than the other, so it wobbles. The antenna is bobbing about. A walk cycle can still be done with just about any character. Final extra credit, if you upload it to some video sharing site, probably YouTube, or maybe Twitch or Newgrounds or DeviantArt or whatever, upload it to one of those public video sites, share the public link on Canvas, you can get up to 2 more points extra credit. And so up to 6 points extra credit on all of that stuff there. Now, you do have to note it, obviously, to me when you submit it in Canvas. There's the part to add a note. Tell me, obviously, I did the walk cycle. Tell me, obviously, I uploaded to YouTube, Newgrounds, whatever. People assume that I know what's in your brain, and guess what? I don't. So you have to tell me these things. This is the same thing going back where I've said, you're working on your project, you know how it works, you know the story, you know that this text is supposed to appear for X amount of time, but when I watch your animation, your text zoomed by. In that vein, tell me that if you did the walk cycle or the YouTube, don't assume that it's so obvious that I'll see it. I've got a whole class to grade. I've got another class at Southwestern that I need to grade. And I've got another class at City College that I need to grade. So lots of grading to do. That's why sometimes the grading is slow. Make it easier on me by telling me that you did the extra credit. And obviously, if you did the demo, obviously, I know you did that extra credit. Tentative deadline is on Sunday, depending on the votes. It might be extended to the 30th. More votes, more good. Please vote on that. But yeah, 20 points. There's the point breakdown. We still have a little bit more to learn, specifically the parallax background. Little bit more on music, a little bit more tweening, making your character move across the screen on a path and such. And I suppose also, if you have a request beyond what we've talked about, send me an inbox message, or if you're on Zoom or you want to get on Zoom, put it in the Zoom too. Like, can we learn this? Can you tell us how to do that? And depending on the time that we have, because we've only got this week, we might put in one final icing on the cake bit of knowledge. But all the things we've talked about, you can make a cool project based on everything we've talked about. The challenge is the time and the time that you have and the sort of willpower that you have to work on it in a short amount of time. So that's the big idea for this week, the big assignment, plus a little bit more to learn. As a reminder, let me show you previous semester's work. The previous semester, they were on the same boat. They were taking the summer as well. And they were doing it all in the summer. Short amount of time. Look at a couple of these. look at a couple of these examples. I'll do share sound for those of you at home, and here in person, I'll play it as well. All right, so let me play that one more time, muting it, and then I will kind of break down what we're seeing. In the totality of it, we see this cool project, but if we break it down, all right, we've got a zoom out happening. That's probably camera movement. Notice right here, we've got a parallax scrolling background. The bunny is bouncing, and notice the levels of the foreground fence, the midground corn, and all that corn looks perfectly drawn. Maybe it was drawn one time and duplicated 50 times somehow. And then there's a background, far background hills, all of them moving at slightly different paces. The bunny bouncing is its own version of the walk cycle. It's probably 3 or less frames, because there's the frame of on the ground and the frame of jumped up, but it's just over and over. Scene change. Change, static background, nothing's happening there. A couple of frame by frame keyframe poses here of the bunny, right? There's no like whipping around, and the ears are swooping around and all of that for lots of frame by frame. There's a couple of key poses, a little sparkles on the okay, then camera movement, couple of frame by frames repeating a couple times. Caret low, caret middle, caret high, 3 of them just over and over a couple times. Moving in, there's only the arms moving around of the fox, not the whole body. Couple of little anger lines, 2 walk cycles at once, parallax background. Actually, was that a parallax? Parallax on that. The whole background moves in one speed. Perfectly fine. Then scene change. Rabbit going behind a layer of corn and another layer behind the rabbit. And then at the end, fin. So in total, this ended up to be exactly 30 seconds. But that's one example. And then music playing in the background, one soundtrack completely through the whole time. I don't know why that rabbit is running away from the fox. That rabbit looks way bigger than the fox, and he'll totally beat him in a fight. But notice also there's the variety of line weights and such. There's some freehand lines on the various backgrounds. There's maybe some of the thinner, more refined lines of the line tool on other parts. So there's also all of that. Also, that carrot is huge. And so, yep, there's that project. Let's see another example. So that one is 34 seconds. Let me play that one more time, break it down with, so at the very beginning, we have text that it's zooming into view. That can be done a couple of ways, either the way we learned with camera, moving the camera, or having an object that tweens from big to small. So I'll remind you on that. When things are symbols, you can then tween them in various ways. Right, so then we've got, this is just a panning down, no parallax or anything. It's just a drawing, bunch of dogs at the dog park, no layers and such that are moving. It's just the camera moving down. You establish a scene. It doesn't have to have a lot of movement here. Although, of course, if you had the time, make them wagging and skipping around, trees rustling, but this works just fine. Camera movement, animation. All right, yeah, we've got here a complex four-legged walk cycle, plus the secondary animation, the 12 principles of animation. We've got also the tongue wagging, although then adding the ears bopping would have also been the next level, as well as the tail wagging. But we've got the legs walking, the tongue, and then the background is also moving. No parallax on the background. That's a little bit of frame by frame animation right there. So it's one drawing, two drawing, three drawing, four drawing, or four. Looks really smooth. Turning to the left, nothing else is moving but just the head. Got the owner there. Proportion's a little off there, but a little bit of frame by frame there. Getting the ball ready to throw it, backing it up, moving the hand forward. This is the most complex one here. So we were doing a key pose on frame 1, 5, 10, 15, 20 for the key poses. And that seems like it's got a drawing frame 1, 3, 5, 7, like every 2 frames instead of 5 frames. So more frames in an amount, more original drawings in an amount of time is a faster, smoother animation. So that's what we're seeing here, pretty smooth. Now, possibly they also used a reference, a tracing drawing, perfectly fine. That's not cheating, that's not a problem. If you want to start with some tracing image, if you can import into Animate a video, maybe find a video of dog running. You can import directly into Animate and it'll kind of break it up into frames for you, and then you go in and trace it. That's known as rotoscoping. And that is a technique of animation that also gives you very realistic drawings. So I don't know if it was done that way, but it vaguely feels like a horse running. Run. Trace it a little bit. Wagging tongue, wagging ears, scrolling background. Other dog, other direction. They're also putting together the sense of a story, never mind the animation. A little bit of frame by frame animation. Moving the face. Eyes got crash. That dazed animation is 2 or 3 frames of the paws moving back and forth over and over, 3 or 4 frames. The music is also selling it very well. We had the idyllic music, and then the overdriven music, and then the final music. So it all then comes together. 34 seconds. You have a complete story. Although there is also a to be continued. So here's an example, maybe a couple more. All right, so this one, notice it uses a lot of reliance on text. That's a way to put together a project as well. You have this text appearing on the black background, various bits of animation to the text, little camera movement to a scene. Text. You have a little bit of frame by frame on the Roomba. There's some movement there. Happens a little fast, but we'll see in a moment how to have some drawing move along the screen in a path. And then the Roomba was a certain size, and then it got larger, came at you, came at the camera. That's also via tweens. We'll review that. Text moving around, child moving little frame by frame. Definitely via the music and such. We have that. That's relatively easy there. You're just kind of changing the sizes of your main drawings a little bit, importing in an anime starburst sort of pattern there. The two combatants coming together, no real animation happening. The hedgehog is moving, but there's no quills flapping around or anything. Then at the very end, though, we get the sparkle and then and the name of the movie, and then of course the credits at the end. So that's another way to do this project. There's all of these examples. I can show more if people want me to show them when we're in lab and so forth, but I want to show a few more hands-on things. But that's what people are able to do on that project in the time limit. This is what you've got to do. Make sure you do all the minimum stuff here. If you spend way too much time on a walk cycle, but you don't do any of this stuff, well, the other stuff is worth more than the extra credit. So make sure you always do at least the minimum things required before moving on to the extra credit. So any questions or comments at home or here on this assignment before we go to the main lecture? So let's get into animate. So I'll show a few examples of tweening. We've started to look at a little bit of that, and we're going to combine what we've looked previously with a little more. Tweening is when the software itself does some animation in between for us, and we can have it move things across the screen for us in a straight line. We can have it move things along a path that we designate. We can also use tweening to make one element start off small and get big, or vice versa, make it be big and make it small, or even have an element rotate on its own, tweening. So as usual here, we'll create a brand new project. We'll set the full HD 24 FPS. Create a project folder for this week and save this file. Set your background to off-white. Right, so this can be done like many things on computers more than one way. I can either draw my character and animate it and then turn it into a symbol, or create a symbol and then put the animation in that. I think it's a little bit easier if you know that you have a plan to first create the symbol, then do the animation. Because if you make the animation within the main timeline, you have to copy or cut all of those layers into a symbol. You might as well, if you know you're going to use symbols, you create the symbol first. You create one of those corn stalks, and then you copy it 10 times, you've got a cornfield. So the way we do that, over on the library panel, properties panel, library panel, Go to your library panel. At the bottom, you've got the button, add a new symbol. So switch over to library panel. At the bottom, new symbol. Call this CHAR underscore face. These names are arbitrary, but if you name them so that you can find them within your library easily, that's good. I've got a character, for example. I've got 7 characters in my project. So if I prefix them with car or character, they all are organized together. And then whatever, this is the character of Jenny. So whatever prefix, that's optional, but that's the recommendation. Different types, keep it on movie clip. The rest, don't worry about the rest. Just give it some name, make sure it's a movie clip, then okay. Top left corner, it shows us we are in the world, we are in the pocket universe, in the multiverse of this symbol. If we were to back out, we get to the main scene 1. So be aware of what scene you're in. If you're in a symbol, be aware of that. If you back out of it to the main scene 1, you can get back into the timeline of that symbol by double-clicking it in the library. Make sure what we're about to do is in the symbol. It's got its own complete timeline. With whatever drawing tool or whatever, just make a face. Get as complex as you want. And have a cool hat. Right, so I've got a character. It's in a symbol. Go back to your main timeline. Name a layer background. Make a layer, name it main. On your background layer, to create a simple background with a sort of road. Nothing complex just yet, but just a scene. This one's at night. Just some area with a road that goes off from the distance. Let's try it this way, from the distance to the foreground. Consider perspective rather than just flat profile, kind of at an angle a little bit, like there's a road coming at us. Just something like that. Save that, lock your background. So my idea is this character that I drew from the library on your main layer. Make sure you separated these into different layers. Drag a copy of that character onto the stage. Way I drew mine, there's the far distance of my scene, the close-up distance. Now, the way I drew it here, I just drew it quickly without any detail, so it's transparent. But the cool thing about working with symbols is they are infinitely editable. Maybe I do want to go back to my original symbol if I double-click it in the library, and I don't want it to be transparent. I go back to the library, double-click it, just fill in some quick colors. Is that wherever the wherever I use a symbol, I have Wherever I use a symbol, I have it linked to the original symbol, and therefore the copies are also edited. So I'm editing it in the library. I go back to the main timeline. Oh, there it is in the main timeline. So that's a very cool ability that we have in Animate. You work with symbols, you change the original symbol, all copies automatically change. So now it's no longer transparent. And my idea is I want the character to start far away and walk towards us. So if we want to adhere to any sort of realism in perspective, we probably don't want the character to be the same size far away as it is close up. In any video game, in any movie, in real life, things appear to be smaller the further away they are, and they're bigger the closer they are to us. So that's what we want: small far away, close, and big close up. So put it in the far distance, resize it to whatever you think is a good size. Far away, remember, hold down the Shift key if you don't want it to distort while you resize it. Hold down Shift to keep it in proportion. The smaller the character is farther away, the more illusion that there is that it is far away. So it's far off on the distance, frame 1. I want to take about 2 seconds for it to walk from there to here. Now, 2 seconds is just a random number I'm picking. It's not the right number. It's going to depend on your animation, your character, your scene, etc. If it's a very craggy, complicated road, 2 seconds might be too fast. It traversed it too easily. If it's a rocket-powered character, 2 seconds might be too slow. So the time is, how to use the software is relatively easy to teach. How to use the software well is harder to teach, and it takes longer. Because what does it feel like? Does it feel like a 2-second animation? Does it feel right as a 3-second animation? As a 3/4 of 1 second animation? That takes time, effort, practice. I'm going to say 2 seconds. So background, make that visible, F5 with no change. Make it visible for 2 seconds, the background. The main character, F6 on frame 48, there will be a change. It will change from small far away to big close up. So on frame 1, it's small and far away. On frame 48, frame 48, keyframe 2, bring it close. Obviously, it doesn't make sense that it continues to be that small, this close to us. Resize it to some amount of size, whatever feels good, that it's close. So far, close. Now animate, use your computational powers to animate for me. In between any of the 2 keyframes, right click, create classic tween. It's coming at us. Does that feel fast? Does that feel slow? If it feels too slow, I need to have less frames. If it feels too fast, I need to add more frames. It's kind of backwards. So let's say that's not fast enough. It took 48 frames to animate. It's not fast enough. Less frames is more fast. Bad grammar, but think about it that way. Less frames, more fast. All right. Too fast, less frames. Think about it in sort of backwards, opposites. Let's say I want this to be faster, so I'll do it in 1 second. I need to remove 1 second amount of frames. So by selecting all of those too many frames, right-click, remove frames. Now my animation is happening in 1 second rather than 2. Now it looks even faster. Less frames, more faster. Actually, I want this to take longer. It to take longer. So instead of it taking 2 seconds to animate, I want it to take 3 seconds. So selecting the final frames, dragging them all to 3 seconds. More frames, less fast. Whatever you like. I'm going to put it back on 2, but whatever you like. How's there? Does that work? Anyone need a little help? Do you have your object or character moving across the screen, and do you have it growing? Any questions so far? It's moving a bit mechanically. Well, maybe it's floating. That's why I can move in a straight line. But maybe it's on the ground. And the path is kind of a little bit meandering. So maybe I want it to follow my path a little better. I'm going to do another version of this. Another layer. We could do this 2 ways. We can take our currently existing layer with all its animation and duplicate it and change it, or we can start over. So 2 ways to do it. I'm going to do the start over just for practice. The shortcuts are great, but I'll show you usually the long way, and then shortcuts are nice. But I have a way to duplicate a layer, and then I can change it, but I'm not going to do the shortcut yet. What I'm going to do is hide that main layer, lock that main layer, double click that main layer so that I can turn it into a guide. Remember, simply hiding it doesn't actually kind of remove it from the movie. It just hides it visually, which is weird. You have to double click it to set it to a guide to really deactivate it. Then I'll make a new layer. No spaces on that, underscore. Frame 1, grab another copy of my character out of the library, put it far away, shrink it down. Frame 48, F6. You duplicate the previous frame, bring it close, make it big. This time, instead of right-clicking in between and selecting classic tween, let's select motion tween. Depending on what you want your tweens to do. Let's say, as we saw on that one student's example of the hedgehog versus the Roomba, there was the Roomba at the far end of the room, and then it came at us. It just came at us in a straight line right at us. Well, that means it started small on frame 1, and they got big on frame 50. That worked nice. That worked fine as a classic tween. Classic tweens work fine if you want to have something big, shrink down to something small to something big, something rotate. We'll see rotate in a moment. Classic tweens work fine if you want things to move mechanically from one place to another. Like, let's say, a scrolling background. We just need it to move mechanically in a certain direction. That's fine. But classic tween doesn't work as well if we want to do what we want to do here, where we want things to move along in a curve or a pattern. A motion tween is better there. So the motion tween, what you can do is go to the different points in the path, and then on some frame, I'm just going to go 5, 10, 15, 20 or whatever. to another point in my curves and see how it's sort of making a movement that it follows. I forgot to do one thing. I was thinking of two things at once. So what you also want to do in your movement over here, instead of having one frame where it's small and then one frame where it's big, you add the size of it as you move it, as you place it. You're moving it across to another point and it'll move it where you want, but you can also resize it as you move it, and it will tween the size of it. So I forgot about that. Sorry. It's not that you have a starting point small and then an ending point big. You can remove that final frame. The whole thing is a motion tween. In this case, it's going to grow it as it moves all around. Now, since I did it kind of wrong at the end, it gets confused here at the end. So this is another chance to do it over like this. Let me back it up. If you right click and do remove the tween. So we want just one keyframe at the beginning. You want F5 all the way to the end. This is slightly different. Forgot for a moment. One keyframe all the way to the end. You don't need two keyframes in between. Just right click and then motion tween. And then from there, you can go to a particular frame number. It's somewhere. I'm arbitrarily choosing 5 frames at a time. That's not always the right way. Often it's not the right way because then you don't have nuance in your. By having everything exactly 5 frames in between, it might be a little too mechanical. This is where you get the practice of it. What's cool about using this kind of animation, this is right click, motion tween. You can also go in and all of these paths, you can edit the path points. Curve these paths around. I was doing the making them straight lines from every movement there. But with the selection tool, you can go in and if you put your mouse near the line, it should then turn into this little curve. You can still readjust your points. Wherever these things moved around at, you can still grab those main points and move them around. Or if you go in between the key points, keyframes, you can move this around a little bit. Try that a moment. You're having trouble, call us over. But try that. Have a motion to move your Now, I will say as beginners, this is very cool and powerful, but if it's not quite working how you want, I would recommend as a beginner, instead of trying to fix what you have, right click, remove, and do it again. You have the ability to go back into each of these keyframes and keep making the perfect changes, but sometimes, because you're a little less experienced, it'll be a little tougher to kind of shape it into what you want. I do recommend, for any of the work that we do in Animate, if kind of things are not quite working and it feels like it's all unraveling, try to do it over, back up to some point where you can do it over, and your second time will probably be better. I know it kind of feels like I work so hard and do it over. I don't like that. Doing it over means practice. Practice means progress. Progress gets you better and better. No one is good in this endeavor automatically. They take weeks, if not years, of learning and practicing and constantly learning to get better. So I know deadlines and stress and everything, but sometimes the answer, even when you get the assistant's help, even when you get my help, sometimes the answer is going to be just start over. And the second time will probably be a little faster because you already know what you previously did, so you can do that quickly. And then the new stuff by faster. All right, so there's that character walking at us. Need a little pause at the end. Everyone's going to forget this, as I said. The animation works, but we need to pause at the end because it got close to the camera. So I'll add 1 second of pause at the end, and pause happens with more time. Frames. So go to second number 3, select all 3 of those frames at once, F5, or right click, insert frame, F5, more time. And so after the walk happens, there's some pause at the end. Maybe more pause is needed, but it doesn't loop right away. These are a couple of tweens. Let's look at one more tween, then we'll take a break. So let's make a new scene. All of this is amazing so far. Let's make a new scene. Remember, your window menu has the scene panel at Shift F2. This is a good shortcut to remember. So open up your scenes. I have scene 1. I'll make a new scene. Change the name if you want. So scenes will happen in the order that they're listed here from top to bottom. It doesn't matter their name, even if it's scene 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. It depends on the order. If scene 10 is first at the top, scene 10 will play first. So it's from top to bottom. Make a new scene. This one, just to kind of show the other things that tweening can do for us. Copy your character again onto the screen. So we have motion tween, classic tween. Motion tween is the one that lets us put points on the screen to make it move in a certain place, to make it curve around, etc. Classic tween is another way to do it, but it doesn't give you those points, but it lets you do different things. So I'm going to use a classic tween for this character to look like it's far away, straight at us, and then coming at us directly. So just getting big. Let's say this goes pretty slow. Let's say it's going to take 5 seconds. So going to frame 5, 120, F6. Starting frame, ending frame. This is the difference as well. Classic tweens require a starting frame and an ending frame, whereas motion tweens don't require starting and ending keyframes. It's just one frame. And I want it to be far away and come at us, but I also want it to fade in. I want it to be invisible far away. Maybe it's coming through the fog, and then it's coming at us through the fog, more visibility, getting bigger. So two things are going to happen. That'll be with a classic tween. So make sure you've got two keyframes, classic tween. Back on frame one, our symbol here, we go to the select it, and if we go to the properties, we have position and size. So if you want the exact dimensions, you've got them there. Then we've got color effects. Remember this one, alpha. Set that alpha to 0. It's going to fade in. First keyframe has my character with alpha of 0. Final keyframe has my character default of alpha 100. Even though it's not set to anything, none is alpha 100. Everything is automatically visible. It gets a fade in, 5 seconds. But at the same time, it's also coming at us. And then imagine some scary music playing in the background. Well, then on the final frame, I need it to be big. Not moving it around left and right, but I want it to be big. On the final keyframe there, size it so that it's really big. Remember, you've got the whole stage. Zoom out to see the whole stage. You get a better sense of it. So there it is. It's fading in. It's coming through the fog. It's coming at us, getting bigger. Scary music playing. Control, test, scene. If you don't want to wait through your previous scenes, 500 frames until you get to this, I would recommend get used to, when you're working with different scenes, go to Control, Test, Scene, so that only this scene is played and looped. That reminds me, oh yeah, I need a pause at the end. It happens, but then it starts over way too fast. I want it to come at us. Pause here, look at us. Evil face. So I need pause, I need end. At the end, I need time. So let's say 2 seconds of pause at the end. F5, no change. You should know this by now. F5, previous keyframe is visible, no change. F6, copy the previous keyframe to make a change. F7, make a new keyframe, blank keyframe. Test this one scene. Now let's say here, yes, it comes at me, and then at the end I want it to have evil face, evil eyes. Okay, well, if I change the symbol, all others will also change, and they will all get the evil face. I don't want the evil face until it's right in front of me. So we have to think a little bit outside the box here. The cool thing about a symbol is that it's this one main copy, and then you could put multiple copies, and then if I make a change to the original, they all change. Cool. But here, I don't want that. I want now, as soon as it comes at me, to change expression. Teeth come out, eyes get red, something. Well, I can duplicate. Symbols and make changes, and then easily swap out the symbols between them. So let's do that. In the library, if you right-click your current character face and select duplicate, is over on the library, right-click your character symbol, duplicate. Call this face angry. Have multiple copies of your original symbol, variations of the symbol. Get a right-click, duplicate, give it some other name. In your library, you've got two perfect copies, but now on the second one, on the angry face, I'm going to double click it in the library to change it to be angry. There's a way that I can do this. You can do this so many ways. Here's one way I'm going to do this. I'm going to get the line tool. Line tool. I'm going to make an angry face. Angs. Of a version normal, so maybe I'll change its name. Character face default, character face angry. Obviously, you can name these things whatever you want. Angry face, normal face. But by prefixing them, by putting some amount of characters at the beginning, all of those line up together, alphabetized if you've got a lot of symbols. If you have angry Johnny, angry Jenny, they'll all line up that way, but then there are various pieces of angry Jenny, sad Jenny, happy Jenny. They'll be out of order. So anyway, I made a variation of my previous symbol. Back to the main timeline. And so here, the character's fading in, and then the character gets angry. So my animation happened up to frame 120. On frame 121, the next frame right afterwards, F6, to duplicate the previous keyframe, there's going to be a change. Every time there's a keyframe, there's some kind of change. And the change that's going to happen is it's going to swap from the default face to the angry face. And the way that works is if I select the symbol on my next keyframe here, go to my properties, this is an instance of, at the top, properties, this movie clip. This is an instance of character face. I want to maybe swap it with some other symbol in my library. Select tool, swap it, gives you a preview of all your symbols. Also, this gives you a spot here. If you hadn't previously drawn your symbol, from here you can also do the duplicate, although it will only duplicate it exactly as is without the ability at that moment to change it. Again, multiple ways to do the same thing. But now I've got the angry face, so okay on that. It's from the regular face. When it comes at us, it then switches to the angry face. And for the rest of the animation here, 2 seconds, it's angry. It's this scene. Maybe 5 seconds is too fast or too slow of this time coming in. Maybe I want a little bit of a pause of not angry for a moment. Maybe just the music is crescendoing and then angry face. So obviously this is where you play your project, you figure things out. It's happening too fast. I want to pause a little bit of time. So maybe not directly from this frame to this frame. Maybe I want this frame to take a little bit of time. So maybe drag it over here. So show me here for a moment like this, nice and happy, and then pause a little, then switch to angry. And this is just a quick change from here to here. Obviously not smooth. If I want it smooth, I would then have to frame by frame change it a little bit for the eyes to move around and blink and snarl and all of that. Here we've got the change. I think 5 seconds is too slow. So I'm going to go in and remove maybe 1 second, select a bunch of those frames of 1 second, click and drag, right click, remove frames, 4 seconds instead of 5. If I play my whole project with the main test movie, we have the beginning part here where the character is walking through the countryside. Then the scene changes to show that we're at the end of the road, I guess, there, comes at us, and then it's evil. Well, project begins way too quickly. Maybe I want a scene that happens before scene 1 to establish something, maybe the empty background before the character appears. So making a layer, making a new scene, organizing in the right way, setting up scene 0. You should name these things meaningfully. Don't just rely on numbers. You'll forget what they are. Give them an actual name. But make the frame 0, scene 0, set things up first, then scene 1, walking horizontally on a path, scene 2, coming straight at you, new scene, text, hello, and then it ends. So the main idea here is the power of creating symbols. Within a symbol, there's all these drawings or animation. What if you do the walk cycle? What if you do the walk cycle in a symbol? Well, then that lets you put your walk cycle on your screen and have it follow a path. And the character is going to be doing its thing walking, and Animate will automatically tween it where you want it to go. It'll look like it's walking. It's going to be walking in place in the timeline here. But then through the power of the tween, it's going to walk across a scene. The tween lets us also fade in and fade out things by starting at a keyframe alpha of 100 or 0 under the color effect. It's not exactly a color, but setting the alpha at a starting keyframe, changing the alpha at an ending keyframe, tweening it. You don't even have to have it moving. We had it moving in the sense that it's small to big, but you can have a tween that is just focused on alpha. I coupled it here with a tween that starts off small, a classic tween that starts off as a small size. In my case, it was exactly 53 by 316. And then at the end of the tween, it ended up as 1490 by 1859. So fade tween as well as a size tween. That works very well for classic tweens. If I need it to position itself around the screen, that's a little better of a motion tween. Take a break, and we'll look at using tweens maybe for rotating things and other things it can do for us. And then, of course, parallax backgrounds. So it's 125-ish. Take a break until 135. If this works, great. Take a break. If it doesn't, call us over, practice it a little bit. We'll be back at 135. So I need a little help. Good. Wait. All right, everyone, let's go on. So I'll show here that we can also use the tweens to animate rotation and position and sort of things. So let's say we wanted to do something regarding that. Let's say we want to do this now with text. We've been doing this with this character. But let's say at the very end, after all of this amazing action, then we get the end happening at the end, but it rotates into view or something. So in a new scene, make a new scene. We have a brand new timeline to work with in this new scene. And we want some text. So with the text tool, we can write the end on the screen. Size, some font, some alignment, whatever you want. Before we get too complicated, remember I said earlier regarding symbols, there's two ways to do it. There's the create a symbol and then build the symbol in its own library, or build something on the main timeline and then turn it into a symbol. It is a little better to create the symbol, then build it and use it. I'm doing it wrong, where I'm doing it on the timeline and then converting that to the symbol. And that way might be wrong, because if I've made 70 frames, whoops, I should have made that a symbol. That's a little bit harder to turn into a symbol. You have to select all your layers, all your frames. Be careful that you select everything, and then you can cut and paste it into a new symbol or convert. That's a little harder. So this is just to remind you, there's two ways to do this. So on a brand new scene, I need a new symbol for my text to be animated. If I already started to set up something on the main timeline, I can always convert it into a symbol. That's got its own shortcut, F8, which is the same as right-click, convert to symbol at the bottom. So all I did was on a new scene 3, all I did was type a little text, the end, and then convert that into a symbol. Right-click, convert to symbol. Give it some name, maybe txt_end of the rotation. The rotation selector, you probably want that on the center. If you leave it on the top left, when it rotates, it'll rotate from the top left like a spoke of a wheel, kind of. If you want it to rotate from the center, set that to the center. So that text on the main timeline is being converted into a symbol with some name and a registration point of the center. The library, now I've got these 3 symbols. Double click it in the library to continue to edit it. It looks exactly the same as before, except that remember, I'm in the timeline, I'm in the world of the symbol. If you double click it from the library, versus I'm on the main scenes. In the library, open up that symbol. For example, I can keep working on it to change its font. Size, its color, etc. With a font that gives a sense of story and drama. Here I chose a very scary font, Chiller, saying the end. If I'm using a simple Comic Sans or Times New Roman and Arial and such, that has a style. If I choose a calligraphy font, that has a style, that has a meaning, that has a feeling, this particular font, and color. If I set this as pink or a pastel blue, it's not as scary as a blood red color, as well as a scary font. So that's part of making a nice animation. Every detail is important, but you might not think of the details until you actually kind of see them. So here's this. Now the registration point, when I created the symbol a little while ago, there was a spot there to select, where does this rotate from? And if you wanted it actually to rotate from a different point, this is also represented from what you're actually seeing on the stage of the symbol. There's the registration point, that little cross that you can't grab, that I'm in the symbol, and that is the registration point. So if actually I did want it to rotate from a corner there, set my object to be that corner, have it rotate from the center or have it rotate from that corner, and I get it to rotate, it's going to rotate there. When we created those other two symbols of the face, I had gone through the path of create a symbol brand new, and that one didn't have. Okay, select your registration point. No problem, because we know that when you're editing the symbol, there's a registration point. So if this was going to rotate from the hat, rotate from that eye, from the center, know that that is the rotation point. So it got some text. It's on its own, it's its own symbol. Back on the main timeline, here's the object. So we have either the way of motion tween, classic tween. Again, the big difference between the motion tween and classic. Motion lets you a lot more visually place things on the screen and move it across and have a little path for it to follow. Maybe I want that here. I want it to maybe bounce into view and then rotate too and all of this stuff. So maybe motion tween might work. In my case, my idea though is just that it's going to kind of rotate onto the screen. Maybe I'll start it really, really big so that you can't quite see what it is. There's just some weird lines on the screen, really, really big, and then they rotate into view, and then they kind of shrink down to be visible on the screen. So classic tween will let me do that. I want on frame 1 the text to be really large, bigger than the whole screen like that. Maybe it's very abstract. I can't quite tell what I'm looking at when my text is that big. Could be getting used to zooming in, zooming out. Control 2 takes you to the full size of your screen there. Control 1 takes you 100% view. What else? Other controls give you different zooms. Control 1, Control 2, Control 3. So anyway, really big. Again, I want to think about this because as a beginner, we just start to animate. We have to think about the pause before anything happens. I want abstractly to see this, and the person, when the person sees my movie test scene at this point, they see that it's kind of abstract, what I'm actually looking at. So I want a little pause here for a moment, then animation. So 1 second of pause, frame 48 or so, F6, pause for 1 second, then from 48 forward, some animation. Let's say 2 seconds of animation. So 72, F6. The animation will happen between 1 and 3 seconds. The pause is happening from 0 and 1. The animation will happen from 1 and 3. F6, because it's going to change. Classic tween. And the change is that it's going to resize. So that the text is visible on screen. text, small text in between, right click, classic tween. Automatically animates it for me. Also want rotation. Maybe I want, for even more abstraction, I want the words upside down. It's upside down and they'll rotate into view. And here again, if I know my plan, I can then animate it better. I'm kind of throwing things out as we work here. Kind of wrong. You have a plan, you have that script, you have the storyboard, you have the Drabble. I'm throwing things off the top of my head. So we get into wrong things. What I could do here, I could go to my symbol, change that original symbol to be upside down, because the scene starts, text is right side up. If I change this upside down text to then rotate to right side up, well, it's upside first, then downside here. That'll be kind of a weird flip. Original to upside down, then it'll start upside down to right side up. So I know the result I want it to start upside down and end right side up, but I've got the problem, which is fixable, of course, that, well, how do I set this up? I've already set up some amount of frames and such. So either I go in and I go to frame 1, flip that over, then frame 48, flip that over, and then frame 72 is right side up. I go to my original symbol, make that upside down. So that takes care of frame 1 and 48. Then I have to manually flip over frame 72. 2 ways to get to the same result. I think I'll do it with the, same result. I'll do it with the original one upside down first. So on the library, so that I want to flip it over. We can do modify, transform, flip vertically. We have the freehand tool that we can grab it and actually rotate it around, sure. Or we can go modify, transform, just flip it over. I'm changing my original symbol. So if I go back to the main timeline, all my symbols are automatically flipped over. Difference here is that I want the final one to be flipped over. So if I go to my final frame, select it. This is happening on the main timeline. So on the final frame here, either select it, free transform it, flip it over manually, or modify, transform, flip it vertical again. So I've got starts upside down, pause, starts to animate and shrink. Extract. Abstract. It'll pause at the beginning, then the animation, then of course it animates and then no pause at the end. So I've got to fix that easily. Some pause at the end, F5. So the funny thing is that by using the modify vertical flip, it gave me a type of animation which is interesting. It flips over, definitely. It's right side up, what I want. But maybe I want the kind of animation of a rotate that is kind of actually a rotation, maybe in a classic sense of a tire. That can be done as well. This result maybe is nice. Let's say I also want to try it again with a slightly different way, same sort of idea. So this animation that happened here, I'm going to double click the layer so that I can lock it, invisible it, guide it to turn it off, to do a version 2. Layer. Drag a fresh copy of my text onto the timeline on the new layer 2. Change it up again so that it's really big and abstract. It comes in upside down. Pause for 1 second, so F6. Frame 30, frame 72, F6. I'm kind of setting it up the same as before. I'll show the rotation slightly different in a moment. This is all happening on a new layer. Right click, classic tween. The difference will be that this time I will do this in a manual rotation instead. Instead of it doing the modify rotate for me and it did it in a way that it wanted, I can do it manually. I can do it specifically by manually going in, and now with the selection, with the transform tool, tell it, nope, I want it to actually rotate. Rotate. Letters are backwards and even scarier. So by doing the modify transform vertical, it's flipping it over, it's mirroring it and such. If I wanted the rotation to be more like a tire type of rotation like that, you see I'm manually flipping it over. Starts off that way, flips over manually by me grabbing the corner and rotating it where I want. My case here, the thing that was also different is that the what I'm rotating is text. So that's a different consideration as well. Text has got to be readable, or maybe you want it readable, maybe not. But what's happening here is the point is that it's getting actual rotation movement around by me manually selecting, start one way, and then final frame, rotate it. It's also backwards because in my original, when I went to modify transform flip, you get a mirror image. So in my case, this is again, working without a plan. Sometimes these things happen. If you've got a plan, you know how to deal with the issues that happened. So obviously here, I did want it to rotate, but it's not backwards text. So I could duplicate the text in the library, make it right side up and use that one where it's a right side up and rotate it that way. I could also, after it rotates vertically like this, then I could, after it rotates over, then what I could do is F6, duplicate that to have rotated one over, between that. many ways of playing with it to get some result. There's no wrong answer. If you're using the tool properly, you're doing it right. If you artistically want this or that, that's fine. Again, I'm not grading on artistry. I'm grading on technique, that you use layers and scenes and tweens and all that stuff. Saw the examples of the previous semesters, and they were ranging from impressive to very impressive. At that moment, I didn't find any that were sort of on the not quite as impressive, but everything's impressive if you do turn something in because you spent some amount of time with your knowledge you've gotten so far. No one really gets a bad grade artistically because this is still very creative. This is all your own hard work. Maybe you want even more time and such. We have, of course, a deadline, but it's not about skill and ability. I think all of you are pretty middle to high level of skill and ability. Your downside will be time. And within the time period that we have, you'll still be able to create something very nice. It's my epic so far. If I were to turn that in, it's still not complete, but if I were to turn that in, is this 30 seconds long enough? Well, here's where you do a little bit of math. So going back to scene 1, my final seconds on scene 1 take me up to 3 seconds. 3 seconds on my first scene. On scene 2, my final time there is about 6 seconds, rounding it up, sure. And then on my third scene, my final ends up to 5. 12, 13, 14. I have 14 seconds in total at the moment, halfway there. So there's no one tally of how long everything lasts that anime tells you. You have to do a little math. After you, we still have to look at that, but after you export, you will have one file, one video file that it will tell you how long it's actually lasting when it's actually running in the movie player, like I was showing the other people's examples. Yes, when it's running on the movie player, it'll tell you the full length of your whole project. The project's not done yet. You'll have to do a little math to add up your scenes, and I'm at 14 seconds so far. So keep track of that. Make sure it's at least 30 seconds as part of the requirements. If it's less than that, it's not full credit. It's asking, did you do ABC? If you did ABD, well, that's not what was asked for. Make sure you do the requirements. Don't go off on a tangent to make something utterly perfect, but then you miss other parts. It's not that one thing that is sublime will take over the points for the things that are lacking. Make sure everything of the required items is complete. Let's say, I got a brand new idea to add to my project here that sort of combines the ideas of automatic tweening plus handcrafted frame by frame. We're seeing that tweening is very nice. It can be controlled in various ways and cuts a lot of effort for me, but sometimes I do need some frame by frame stuff. Maybe the face over here, I want to do a couple frame by frame animations here myself. So let's combine a little bit of the two. I'm going to make a brand new scene. And I want this scene to happen before the end. So again, don't rely on these just numbers of scenes, name these things, because I have here maybe intro, and then I've got action, and here we've got end, and then here we have a brand new idea, drop. Obviously, I need the end to happen at the end, so you can easily rearrange these. So I made a brand new frame, a brand new scene. That is my third scene in the sequence. Rename these to be meaningful. So I'm going to get the angry face, put it on the screen. Give it some pause beforehand, visible before any changes. All right, so here's where we're going to then combine or segue or add on to it some frame-by-frame animation. We had previously this ways of animating things a drawing at a time. Maybe that's what I need to switch over now to now draw or change the face and the hat and stuff. Well, this is a symbol. It's an instance of that object. If I change the original object, all objects throughout my whole 30 seconds change. So maybe also, as the note there in the chat, maybe we want to do this, what we're about to see, to make small changes to the to what's already there. So I need to sort of separate this drawing from its original parent element so that if I change this, it doesn't change the others. So select, this is on frame 24, keyframe 24. Select that object. It says this is an object, it's a movie clip. Select it and then go up to modify, break apart. Now it simplified it down to a basic shape, where I can go in and make all of these changes to the drawing on frame by frame. So here I can do what we previously did in terms of every 2 frames, F6, to make some kind of change to it. Let's say, yeah, I'm going to do it that maybe like arms are going to grow out. So the way I drew this, I could either draw the new bits of the change or manipulate what's already there. I'll say, maybe I'll draw something new. So arms are going to start to form. So keyframe there, arms will start to form, brush tool. I'm going to start to draw a little bit of nubs starting to pop out over here. I'm not going to do all of the detail just yet of fixing it up, all the detail. I'm going to draw the key poses, then go in and make the changes. Both ways, there's like no way around it. If you're doing frame by frame animation, it's going to be tedious. It's going to take time and effort. And so these nubs are going to pop out and they're going to be claws or something. So jump over 2 frames, F6. From there, I'm then going to draw them kind of popping out a little bit more. Six. Jump 2 frames over, F6. Then draw it. This part. So you see these are popping out. This is to show you that it's going to some animation of frame by frame where it started off as a symbol, where I can't do that to that, or else all will change at once. The big difference here is that I eventually take that symbol and modify break apart, where then I can start to draw frame by frames. Doing it very quickly here to kind of give me the idea, is it going to work if I start to do this? Obviously, then I need to go back into each of these frames and clean up what I've drawn. I started at this point with arms are starting to appear. Well, that needs to get filled in with color here. I don't want these lines to be here, so I will do this trick of overlapping the lines to make them disappear. That one's on the other side of the perspective of it all, so I won't make that disappear because it's on the other side of the edge of the face. But then this one is closer to us, so I do remove that part to make it look like it's close to the camera. And then the next part, clean that one up. Fill in color here, here, here. Actually just right there. Then tweak the edges, remove this. Edges, fill in bucket, base. Yes, it's going to be tedious. It's not going to be perfect the first time. This is the first time you ever take this class and maybe work with anything seriously of animation. By frame animation, the great thing about it, it can be very precise, but that precision comes with time. Remember, with our eraser, we have that shortcut. I want to remove this little piece now that I cut the connection. I can click it and just delete, or if I have the eraser tool and activate the faucet, that is its own separate piece, and I can just click on it. Keyboard shortcut, E for erase, V for select. Maybe get used to that very quickly, EV. With eraser tool, that's gone. V to then clean up the details. Again, with this, yes, it's going to torment me that there's 12 pixels that are wrong. No one's going to notice that unless it's very, very, very obvious. No one's going to notice that when your whole animation is happening. And when you've got a deadline, maybe that'll be fine, because I'm not going to grade you on that. That's not going to lower your grade. Yes, it's a mistake, but I'm not going to grade you on that. I'm going to grade you on, whoops, you didn't do a parallax background because you were stressing over every pixel. Maybe version 1 to turn in the assignment, you leave that stuff, and then you come back later when you've got time, even after you graduate, and go back to fix up this magnum opus of yours and fill in and fix every pixel. Don't worry about fixing every pixel with your deadline. It's here, same thing, fill in my colors. Clean up. Lap that. Over that. In my case here, I've got to fill it with color. So K, paint bucket with K, that'll switch over to your color. V, switch over to move the line. Move line, K, bucket. Control Z. Bucket. V, overlap that. V, overlap that. E, base it. V, black, cut, overlap, cut, overlap, cut, overlap, cut, E, space bar to temporarily get the move tool. Overlap. K as in kick the bucket, that's right. And you can fill in colors easily that way. E for eraser. Now the eraser's working for me well here because I activated my faucet mode. If you simply have it regular there and if you click, it's just going to do that. Make sure for eraser, you activate faucet mode. Then when there's any lines that are touching, they all erase. Then V for very good selection, I suppose. And then overlap your corners there. I usually I go to the corner. If you go to the straight edge of a line, it probably still gives you what you want, but it often works a little better. If you go to the corner, you'll see your icon become a little right angle, a little corner, so you can overlap. Space bar to move around. Erase it with faucet. Very good move, very good selection. Overlap to cut, overlap to cut. K, kick the bucket, color. Fix that at some point. If it's a very obvious like that, okay, maybe I will fix that. But if it's a couple of things like this, if it's all part of the animation of it all, that's going to happen in such quick movement that maybe it's part of the style, like the tendrils coming out of the little squishy body. But maybe something like this, maybe I do want that fixed. So you have to practice, use your best judgment. Look at it, zoom in, zoom out, play it. Or don't waste time with test your whole movie. You have to wait for all your previous frames and scenes to play before we get to this third scene. Get used to control, test this scene. Now, it claims it's got a keyboard shortcut, Control Alt Enter, but when I press it on mine, it doesn't do it. And that enter of num claims that it's the enter on the number pad. So I've been trying to press Control Alt Enter on my, if I press Control Enter, it does play the whole thing, but it claims Control Alt Enter. Enter. Nope. Unlock. Nope. Yeah, I don't know why on my keyboard that Control Alt Enter doesn't shortcut. So up from there, Control Test Scene. I need pause at the end to show those evil hands. A tip to give you is definitely test your scene often. You're spending so much time drawing it and the like, but then you're not actually playing it. And then you're not actually playing it. And so you're not seeing your results. Best animation is when things are moving. The best character animation is when things are moving, but multiple things are moving. Right now, the only thing that's moving are the hands. There's also a hat, there's also eyes, there's also a mouth. As a beginner, I would focus on one thing at a time to move. That's nice, that's fine. Things are moving, cool. Intermediate and advanced animators will also make the hat wiggle a little. Will make the eyes move somewhat. Will make the mouth move somewhat. Maybe even the rest of the body. That's intermediate and advanced. As a beginner, focus on one thing changing, one thing at a time. Maybe at the end here, after the arms come out, maybe at the very end, little shake of the hat. Like the movement of those hands coming out so fast makes the hat wiggle. So animate one thing at a time. So let's say I want the hat to wiggle a little. So maybe with the wiggle of the hat, let's say, so after that comes out, pick somewhere, F6. This is not at the end of everything. This is after some of the animation here. Copy that. How to make the hat wiggle. I can redraw the hat moving a little, or I can use the tools of like rotation and such. Maybe I want to make the hat wiggle back and forth a little bit, a couple of frames. I can use the free transform. Free transform lets you rotate things, of course. But what I want to do is rotate the hat. Now, the hat is not on its own layer. If way back at the beginning, when I drew my original symbol here, if I drew my original symbol in the very first character face, what if I, 2 hours ago, drew this character in its own timeline, separate things to animate that are not connected? It's a little late to do that. I've already made it a little too complex. Foresight is 2020, or hindsight is 2020. So if I had drawn this originally with separate pieces on their own layer, that's allowed. In a symbol, you can have as many layers as you want. Why not make your character divided up into pieces? Why not make the main body one layer, left and right hands their own layers, left and right foot their own layers, hat its own layer. I've got, what is that, 6 layers as a character, so that then later on I can further edit it. Because the point is, I want to make that hat rotate a little. Okay, I didn't do it right the first way. Here's a way that I can still do it. Lasso tool lets you make a freehand selection as best as you can of the hat. You'll probably also get part of the head. That's fine. Selection of the hat. I also missed a tiny portion on the left that I missed. It's okay. I can hold down Shift on the keyboard and make a selection of what I missed. Let me show that. Let's say I was trying to make a big selection like this. I missed a whole chunk of the hat. Whoops. Holding down Shift can then let me add to my selection. Say I selected too much of the head. This, when I do the rotate, that part of the head would also change. Okay. Lasso selection selects a piece. If I need to select more, hold Shift, then select what's more. If you need to select less of what you've drawn, what you've selected, hold Alt, and then sort of draw a selection and unselection. It's not Alt, Control. It's the unselect. It was Alt, wasn't it? It's an exclusion. Unselect. Angie or assistants, could you look up how to make a select and then to unselect? Wasn't it Alt? It's not selecting. Okay, so while we get that answer, the point is that you make a selection of the hat right here as best as possible. Try not to select more than that. If you do, you can add to it with Shift. Yep, so Shift is adding to it, but then I'm trying to do Alt and it's not removing from it. It's doing like an exclusion. So that's weird. Icon. Yes, good point. So maybe over on the tool selection, maybe we've also got some other keyboard shortcuts conflicting, but the point is if I have too much selected, I can unselect it. But for the moment, just try to select it like this. Sometimes if I want to select this whole hat, I might want to try to go all the way around over here, but then my hand slips and I'm stuck. Try this instead, build the selection up. If you kind of select this amount so far, then hold Shift and then add this part over here. Shift, then add this part over here. That way, if you add too much, you can undo your last selection. Oops, too much, undo that last selection. Don't think about it as a whole unit, that it's one hat. Think about it as pieces of color. So with Shift, you can go in, add there. So I've selected the hat. The point of that is that now, since the hat is selected, the hat itself is editable. Animate doesn't really see it as a hat. It sees it as pieces of color. But the point of this is then with the frame by frame, I can then do the little bit of the wiggle. I'm gonna do it pretty sloppy just to show you. I can free transform it. There's going to be a rotation. If I start to rotate from there, it rotates there. What if I grab that rotation point, put it here, rotate from here? Yes, it's going to break it apart from the rest of the head. I have to go in and manually fix that a little bit. But jump 2 more frames, F6, wiggle it over again, fill in the details. And again, if I had drawn the character originally with some editability, that'd be nice. But at this point, what I could do, once I've made the selection, modify shape, where is it at? Modify group right here. So this sort of it doesn't turn it into a full symbol, but now that is sort of its own thing. Doesn't conflict with anything else. Let me take that back. So if you're going to do some frame by frame, you broke it apart. Everything's just colors and shapes. If you further make a selection, temporarily, you've got your selected piece, modify group. Now, if you were to deselect or get your selection tool, that's sort of a piece. Obviously, then you can modify ungroup later. But that's its own temporary piece. It's not a library object. It's just on the screen there. And the point of that is I've kind of isolated that. I can free transform that or quick transform. Set the rotation point here. Wiggle it over a little bit here. Jump 2 frames, F6. Object, wiggle it back to the left. Jump 2 frames, F6, wiggle it back to the starting point. Now there's a little wiggle there at the end. Yes, of course, there's missing pieces there. I do then have to manually go in and clean them up just a little. Because this is not a hat, this is not a head. It's bits of color. So to fix that up, I would ungroup it. So now all of these pieces come back together where I can then just kind of fix up the lines, either redrawing them or manipulating them. If it's its own individual group, it's not connected to anything else. Therefore, if I'm trying to fill in a color there, it won't because now it's a broken shape. So I might have to then ungroup it so that it's a basic shape so that they all touch and connect. And then I go in and make the elements connect so that I can fill in with color. the whole project from beginning to end. Probably need some sort of intro stuff. A scary night, part 1. Then the actual path happens. Then the end, I need more pause at the end of there. The end. So I need a pre-scene. I need then movement or a little staging to show we're at some scary scene. Then the character moves in, close up to you, hands appear, pause a little bit more to get a sense of that horror. Pause at the end there to get a sense of it. The very least, almost always plan on adding about 1 second after your main animation. Anything you do that you animate, probably you want 1 second at the end so that people see what happened. People get a sense of what happened, not just the animation suddenly happens and then it moves on to the next scene. You want time to absorb what happened. That's part of one of the 12 principles. Staging, I believe, or follow through, one of those. But it's that you give time, add time or remove time for the flow of it. So now that new scene there, that adds another 3 seconds to my project. I'm at 17 seconds. So parallax backgrounds. But we're at the end of the day today. So we'll do parallax on Wednesday. If there's also other requests, like I said, put them in the chat box or send me a message on the inbox, the Canvas inbox, if you want some other animation techniques. But we have the parallax background to give you a sense of depth. Two types of tweens. We've got that, remember, the asset warp tool. Looked at that a little while ago. Review the videos in Canvas. Practice that. That's another way. Deform your elements to do some frame-by-frame animation, or tweens. Maybe you want a wagging tail. So what if you set up these, the pins over here? What if I want now the arms to move around? Setting up pin from here to here to here. Now it gives you bones so that you can move that around frame by frame and tweens and the like. Play with that. I'll undo that. Maybe I'll remind you on that next time. But we'll wrap up in a moment. So this practice here, we might be able to do 30 minutes lab time up until 3. Then I've got to go. I got to teach another class. Then on Wednesday, we'll have the lab from 2:30 to 3:30 or so if you need it. If you're working at home, work at home. Let's look at the poll one more time, what people said about the deadline. Seven votes. So far the winner is July 30th. So plan on probably then the deadline will be that 30th. As we continue the other, we got 8 results there now. So we have 6 votes on that. So probably the 30th will be the deadline. We'll still continue with the interactivity coding on the next lessons. And you'll have to juggle that working on the animation as well as homeworks that there will be for the coding. You turn it in early, great. It's done, it's out of the way. But probably the deadline will be that 30th there. coming together faster than you think. Obviously, you'll think to yourself, I wish I could do that. This looks so expert here. How do I learn to do that? It's an ongoing learning process. And the more time you put into it, the better it gets, the better you get at this.